Welcome, grasshoppers, as we continue our parade of brilliancies from the stunning player Vasyl Ivanchuk. In this particular encounter, Vasily demonstrates his versatility yet again, as we've seen two games where he played d4 in lengthy but very variation semi-Slavs, and in this particular example he tackles Sergei Karjakin in his favorite opening. In fact, Sergei Karjakin is one of the best Najdorf players in the world, and it is often that we will look to Sergei Karjakin for a repertoire for black if you were to play this opening. And how to deal with it. Now, in this particular situation, we should be considering all the possibilities here, as we are looking for candidate moves for white. Now, once again, this is a pretty well-known opening. Therefore, there are about 12 very popular moves in this position, to say the least, all of which lead to a variety of positions that can only be chosen by taste. So, for example, off the top of my head, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8, 9, 10, 11 that I have played myself in this particular position. Preferably, I like the main line variation. Pegasus is back. Esther Esteban, good morning. How are you? Ron is here. Ron made this stream series possible, and I have to actually return the favor because I have 4 more books from my Amazon wish list that were sent to me. Like 5 books this past week have arrived thanks to the Amazon wish list, so I've got study streams up the wazoo to do based on each of these books. And right now we're currently reviewing the book Ivanchuk move by move. The entire move by move series, by the way, is impeccable. And how they present it, how they pose the questions, and many times how they organize the material. I know, right? He's been keeping me working. I'm supposed to give my oldest daughter a ride home, so at any moment I could get a phone call. I'll mute the stream briefly to find out whether or not I'm picking her up from the train station or picking her up in the Bronx. God help me. Oh, sounds like they might be home. Coffee soon indeed. Cheers, Pegasus. So, interestingly enough, I would actually say for Ron to write down 3 more possible moves. I have played f4 in this position, Ron, based on the old Najdorf recommendations of beating the Sicilian, a book that came out by Grandmaster John Nunn as a repertoire against all Sicilians. f4 is a very problematic move. Bishop e2 is a move that is recommended by Anatoly Karpov. Yeah, I know. When you live far from the train station, when you're in the burbs, it's about it. And the other move that Pegasus suggested, Bishop g5, is the main line move, the one that I have always played. a3 is not really a move. a4 was played by Grandmaster Nick DeFermian. I just triple bagged. Get that T ready. Yes, indeed. I have not quite triple bagged. I've double bagged. So meanwhile, I would say that perhaps the most flexible move to date is certainly f3. This is by far the best move. It was not played by Karjakin in this particular game, And f3 has come about as a culmination of the supreme popularity of bishop e3. And bishop e3 runs into a variety of problems involving knight to g4, trying to scarf the bishop pair, where this bishop gets shuffled all over the place, based on h6 and g5, and then the bishop ends up getting sandwiched on g3, allowing the bishop to come out to g7. So therefore, the tried and true moves, bishop e2 was used by a student of mine, Lilia, when she beat her first master and earned an article in Chess Life magazine here in the United States. She probably was 500 rating points below him, if not a little bit more, when she beat her first master with this particular setup. It involved the bishop shuttling to this diagonal later on in the game, and her erstwhile 2200 plus strength, who had been over 2300, did not handle it very well, as she was very patient. Later she had castled, and she even got a rook lift in with the rook to g3 as well. Another move in this particular possibility, which is probably the most popular move, if not f3, h3, which was played by Bobby Fischer originally in 1966 or 1967, when he found everyone was copying him. And because he found that everyone was copying him, he decided that he was going to play h3 and beat 3 players in a row. And it was 1967, I believe, maybe Seuss. The Seuss interzonal. I'm trying to reach for the exact tournament, but he played it in the same tournament, h3, and he won all 3 games. The idea being the Kara's attack idea, involving g4 and g5, which has now today reached the culmination of its popularity. Kostya of ChessDojo Live fame has actually written a book on a modernized repertoire for the white pieces, and I believe that this is his recommendation against the Najdorf. Interestingly enough, the move played by Karjakin is not the tried and true bishop to g5, which is by far the oldest of the variations that were always. In fact, Bobby Fischer suffers a very serious loss to F.M. Geller in his 60 memorable games on the black side of this, which keeps the bishop g5 held in high respect among all anti-Najdorf moves. However, Ivanchuk actually rejuvenates Fischer's favorite variation. In fact, this is often called the Fischer variation, with threats to f7. Black needs to reply to control the center squares with e6. He has what's called the small center, and the small center is used later to expand. Double bag is the standard. It does hit the wallet to use increased T bags, although they are pennies on the dollar worth it. So Bobby Fischer's move to this day still holds true. We don't want to allow any funny business with a knight sacrifice followed by d5 and a fork trick on these 2 squares. So therefore black does get control of the d5 square, and commonly when black is playing the Najdorf, they play b5. Ironically, I played 2 Najdorfs versus Grandmaster Walter Brown, 6-time US champion, and I had black on the first day of the simul in 1988. I played a Najdorf against him, and I had white on the second day against Najdorf, and I managed to hold him to a draw when I had the white pieces, and I was very thankful for that. Basically, we became very good friends afterwards, and he actually gave me a bit of work in managing and publishing the Walter Brown Chess Association. That's usually what it was called. The WBCA was the World Blitz Chess Association newsletter, publishing it and producing it and distributing it in the Marshall Chess Club, and running Friday night rated events in the Walter Brown Chess Association, aka World Blitz Chess Association rating list. He held his own rating list for it because no one else at the time was doing blitz ratings. This is before the internet, of course, and ICC had not yet become popular as it were to become in 1994. So rating blitz games and taking blitz games seriously was in its infancy between 1989 and 1994. Here we are. There you go. That's the best way. It's just to clean your coffee maker, Pegasus. Needless to say, in this particular position, White has a number of choices on the 8th move, and I am going to let everyone choose their candidate moves for White in this position, because it is all, of course, a matter of taste. Whether or not you clean your candidate moves with calcium tablets or not. And there are 3 very popular moves in this position for White. Karjakin plays the Ivanchuk plays the second most popular move for the dynamics of it all. The purpose of choosing candidate moves, by the way, is to look for good moves. All of the good moves in the position, whether you'd look for 3, 4, or 5 good moves, compare those moves to your mood, temperament, to the calculations that ensue while considering those candidate moves. And then by choosing one, hopefully you'll not have found just a good move, but a better move, and possibly even, hopefully, the best move. Whether or not you've played it or not, your post-game analysis will allow you to improve as a player. A3, F3. A3 is played, F3 is played, but they are far less popular than castles, of course, which is, I believe, the move that I think I was prepared to play in this particular position. And then lending itself to what Black played, I would play Queen F3 on the next move, which is one of the 3 most popular moves in this particular position, eyeballing the rook on H8. I'm sorry, on A8. Along with the push. Unfortunately, this runs into the immediate bishop to B7, and Black doesn't have that many problems. And of course, there's also the possibility of playing bishop to G5, which is what Ivanchuk actually chose in this particular position. Rufik, YouTube, how are you? Good morning and greetings. I am National Master and FIDE Trainer John MacArthur. I'm doing instructional streams as often as I can. I often share when my streams are going to be online on YouTube and within my Discord channel, which you can find in those links. And for the most part, you may also join the dojo for regularly scheduled training. I will be filling out the dojo schedule, as you can see those tournaments on a daily basis from here to the end of Kingdom Come every single day. You can click on the word tournaments on either of those pages to see what the past events were, and that I've very rarely ever missed a day in the past 2.5 years. So, Karjakin answers with this most solid move. There's absolutely nothing wrong with just solidly developing. And in this particular position, I played this myself with regularity in 1987, thanks to an article by Dmitry Gurevich on the Najdorf variation with 9 Queen F3. It did not make a lot of sense to me. I was born of the Fischer generation, where I meant to play F4, F5, pry open that long diagonal, and try to get at these squares the best I could. But Queen F3 was an eye-opener for me, as Black has this move Queen to C7, and I won many short games with my knowledge of theory pre-computer in these lines just by playing over the games from that variation. And it, to this day, has cemented my understanding that if you play over great players' games, whether you're playing over them within opening variations or not only are you going to study and observe and learn the opening variations that are played by those players, but you're also going to be absorbing the patterns and concepts of great players to be used in your own games. So in this particular position, of course, I can without a doubt say that the best move for white is castles queenside. However, in this particular position, Ivanchuk kind of rushes things just a little bit with the move e5. And the standard response to defending the bishop, the rook on a8 is bishop to b7. The Zwischenzug, the in-between move, e takes d6, bishop takes d6 is standard. Then we just have to find a good square for our queen. Now, mind you, we are threatening to play the move knight f5 in this position, and taking a pawn where our king in front of where our king hopes to castle is never such a wise idea. In fact, capturing the g2 pawn is nowhere on the radar for strong players as they seek to develop their pieces. And in this particular position, bishop to c5, moving the same piece twice, avoiding the forking possibilities of knight to f5, seems to be the most reasonable. However, after this game, I might recommend knight c6 if you wish to develop your pieces, and I think this is more along the lines you would wish to hope for, as after knight f5 castles queenside, the game is roughly level. No great shakes on either side of the board that we have to worry about. But it's just another chess game, as Ivanchuk chose to move bishop to c5. Karjakin chose to move bishop c5, Ivanchuk castles queenside, and now black chooses a move that has very, very good percentages for black, mind you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the idea of knight to c6. But for the fact that your opponent may have a home-cooked novelty coming up. In fact, we may give you 2 times the 45 seconds available for this particular one as we look for candidate moves for white for Ivanchuk. I think I've played mainline theory in almost every opening variation from both sides of the board over the course of my decades of playing. And obviously this is the time that you might want to pause the video if you are watching on demand. And on c to e2, bishop takes f6 was pretty much the standard move played in this position for almost a couple of dozen encounters, and was always previously played prior to this game. However, I hovered over a later game, Karjakin playing white against Gashimov, and he actually took Ivanchuk's idea to the next level as Ivanchuk plays queen takes e6 check. Now, who doesn't want to sacrifice their queen for 2 pawns against a super GM World Championship candidate like Karjakin? That's strength, right? Now, it's quite amazing that Karjakin probably faced this over the board and was besides himself. After all, this was in a rapid event, Melody Amber, and I don't know that it was Melody Amber blindfold. That would be even more impressive if this were played in the blindfold portion of the Melody Amber rapid events. But basically, they had computer screens that they looked at where they could not see the pieces on the board, and they merely moved these pieces digitally on their screens using ICC to a great extent. And it allows them to click on the squares and move the pieces, and they possibly had a score sheet handy and available to them if they needed a written reference. But after all, what is one to do but to accept this queen sacrifice and weather the storm. Now, it's at this moment that black has several continuations to try to defend, all of which are roughly equal. Believe it or not, this position is not advantageous to white, nor is it worse. I mean, there are some arguments that one particular variation may be worse for white, but the counterplay and the human intention in these particular moves is priceless, as Ivanchuk has sacrificed his queen for 2 pawns and keeping the opponent's king in the center. Now, I can't say that this game was played like the previous queen sacrifice that we looked at in the absence of the computer era, but of all the moves, bishop to b6 is certainly equal, returning the queen in return for a knight. We have 4 minor pieces versus and 2 pawns less versus 3 pieces and 2 extra pawns. 1 extra pawn on both sides of the board, as we have 3 to 2 pawn majorities on the queen side and on the king side as white. But another move that might be considered here is bishop to d6, returning the queen that way. That is perfectly level, and queen to e5, which is absolutely equal, which was played in the game. The move that is thought to be, or supposed to be, better for black, although on a superhuman level, is queen to e7, which once again runs into the problematic rook on h to e1. And the easiest way to equality is just returning the queen for the knight in this particular position, and barnacling. Just barnacling and trying to hang on for dear life. Bishop takes f6, g takes f6, and the game, of course, is almost level in material, give or take the opponent having an extra minor piece for 2 pawns. So, being facing this variation for the first time, Karjakin actually played queen to e5, and his basic concept was to grab the bishop on g5 on rook on h to e1, or perhaps grab the knight on e6 on rook on h to e1. But we won't know, since white actually played the move knight takes g7 check, and after king to f8, Ivanchuk repeated the position after knight e6 check, stepping into the danger of a discovery, and only now did Ivanchuk bring the rook to the center. And Karjakin's idea, of course, was to try to maintain equality by returning the queen for a rook. However, the in-between move, knight takes c5 check, rook takes e1, leads to further problematic play. Now, this game is not given in full in the Ivanchuk move-by-move book, but it is discussed as black attempts to take some of the teeth away from white's position. And we do have to consider for a moment what we would do here. Candidate moves for white. And I have to say, many variations lead to advantages for white in this position. Given the fact that white has 3 pawns for the exchange, black has 2 rooks, and white has a bishop and a knight, instead of 2 knights. But white has 3 pawns, is what I should say. White has 3 pawns for the exchange, having a knight or a bishop and 3 pawns in return for the exchange. Candidate moves for white. Now, we have to consider all of our positional motifs, maxims, basically looking for what are the best or worst placed pieces. What is the opponent's idea? Where are the weaknesses? So, for example, rook to e5 check is a move that might be hard to resist. Rook to e3, lifting up and across. Pegasus also observed that he might try to wound black up from the rear with bishop f7. The bishop f7 idea seems a little bit problematic, but is certainly reasonable. Rook to a7 will be met by knight to d6, which was actually the move played in the game, and Pegasus got that on his second attempt. And this contains quite a bit of venom, as knight f7 check is threatened. Now black has to choose to deal with all of white's intentions in order, and chooses rook on h to f8. And now we have to consider how we are going to regroup again toward the white king. Candidate moves for white. So are we actually getting the exchange back with knight f7 check? Do we need to be concerned about our bishop being locked off with check? Are there greater threats that we can go after black's king with the help of a rook or our pawns? Remember, when you're looking for these candidate moves, as you watch any other streamers who are playing, or professional grandmasters, or Magnus Carlsen in the Meltwater Championships, your goal is to look for 3 to 5 candidate moves and try to find the move that will at least be within the reach of what they would play. And of course, if you're studying chess from a book, you could also be covering the next move and prioritizing your moves, writing them down in order. H4 is perfectly reasonable. Not among the top 5. Rook e5, however, was among the top 5 previously, not again. In fact, rook e3 would appear on the horizon. Rook e7 would appear on the horizon. And of course, the best move, according to our Silicon friend, at knight e2, just trying to regroup pieces across to that side of the board. That was not played, by the way, by Ivanchuk. Neither was rook e3, which is, of course, a perfectly reasonable move to try to wrap him up, or rook e7, which is another move might try to catch him unawares from the rear and keep the knight tied down to the defense of the h7 pawn. But instead, Ivanchuk plays perhaps the third best move in the position with f3. And h4 is certainly in the cards, as well as g4, trying to limit things, or just plain trying to anchor one of his 2 knights on the e4 square. So, Ivanchuk's opponent, Karjakin, does not want to go down without a fight and chooses b4, which somewhat forces our hand. And again, there are better moves than the one that Ivanchuk played in the game. For example, knight a4 is considered better by Stockfish. Knight e2, considered the best on the previous move, is still in consideration. But of course, Ivanchuk goes with the standard and obvious knight on c to e4 check. Knight takes e4, and after the move, rook takes e4. Forces black's hand in simplifying the position. Knight takes b3 check, and a takes b3, capturing toward the center. Karjakin, of course, needs to guard his pawn, and now we have to consider how we're going to go about wrapping this game up, or choosing how we're going to go about playing this position with candidate moves for white. Now again, Ivanchuk did not play the best computer-suggested candidate move but instead chose a move that is perfectly acceptable and purposeful to try to increase his advantage from a clear advantage. There are a variety of pawn moves, rook moves available. The knight does seem to be white's best placed piece. Again, we still have h4 check, which is not necessarily on the radar of Stockfish for some strange reason. I certainly would be tempted to go for this, but Ron does have a piece of it. The best move the computer had thought at one moment or another was rook to e6, trying to wrap up the king from behind and keep him within that mating net. After all, we still have possibilities of playing h4 check or c4 or knight e4 check. And instead, Ivanchuk goes for the very straightforward rook to g4. Potzer c check, Potzer plays check, king f6, knight e4 check. And after king e5, suggestions and candidate moves for white. How to go about this? So the name of this study in the Discord, as we're about to share it, is actually a World Championship contender, as he was a challenger to the World Chess Championship, especially in the FIDE cycle, as he lost to Alexander Khalifman when he was clearly the best player. He got ahead in the match and then unfortunately collapsed under a fit of nerves. King to d2 is perfectly acceptable, absolutely. Not one of the recommendations of our erstwhile engine, but on the other hand, one should note that this pawn on a5 is tied down to a certain extent to the possibility of a rook arriving on the 5th rank. We might not want to play that move just yet. Knight to d2 and knight to f2 are among the computer's top suggestions, along with knight to g3, knight to c5, and the best move, of course, was played by Ivanchuk. Rook to h4. And in the course of trying to seek counterplay, Karjakin does not find rook to g8, which could easily be met by knight to g3, one of the previous candidate moves, but instead chooses a4. Trying to seek counterplay and open up a file for his rooks to be able to go after white's pawns. And after b takes a4, rook takes a4. It is at this moment that Ivanchuk decides to remove the defender of the b4 pawn, force the white king out into the action, and then choose to go after white's pawns, which can be easily defended by themselves in the form of a pawn chain. And of course, rook to g1 and rook to f1 are of equal value here, as Ivanchuk seeks to just batten down the hatches. Now, there's no way, of course, to attack the pawn on c2, as there's a fork protecting against anything arriving on the c1 square. So Karjakin naturally goes after the b2 pawn, and Ivanchuk is basically playing cleanup as he hoovers up most of black's material. Queen to d5, knight to e4, king to c6, try to batten down the second rank. This is unfortunately all Ivanchuk at this point going on forward. Rook to h1, trying to stir up trouble from the other side with a series of checks, but the game is for the most part over, and it's a wonder that Karjakin is playing on, because now we've cleared the square. We've cleared the file for our b pawn to start marching forward, and black still seeking counterplay. Not sure of where to place his rooks, but all Ivanchuk is doing is consolidating his position. And by checks, by the way, in the endgame, one should not check the opponent's king toward the center. It's far too helpful, as the game is worsening and worsening for the opponent. Rook to h5 goes after the last remaining pawn on the board, and for me it's fairly clear that we could probably consider resigning after this move. Check, check. Now we can actually cross and cover with knight to f5 if needed, if and when needed. So we grab the last remaining pawn that black has. Black goes after some counterplay. White simply protects it, and then crosses and covers with his king. And white chooses to resign here, as well he should. Needless to say, I will put Pegasus's name. He is a contributor on this particular study. I will be putting Pegasus's name on all of these broadcasts in order to thank him for his contribution to the dojo. The ever so amazing Ron drawing from our Amazon wish list. Thank you, Pegasus. And as usual, we're going to pass over the baton to another streamer as we round out and give credit to those who followed. Ruffic from YouTube, and we're going to transfer it over to Jeffrey Shaw, who's a new streamer, also celebrating Nicholas Dojan's birthday. Today is Grandmaster Badur Jobava's birthday. I hope he's doing well in his online games. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for the new follow, Ruffic. Thank you, Ron, for being one of those many supporters of the stream, the premiere of which, at the moment, keeping the stream going and making it all worthwhile. Even though I'm doing it because I enjoy it, it's always helpful and appreciated when others throw in their support as well. Namaste, Pegasus. He is one of the legends of our stream. Cheers and ciao, and thank you all. Only 2 raiders headed over. Cheers and thank you.